Welcome to this week's episode of BSD Now. We've got some special treats for you guys on this week's show. It's the long-awaited Installfest segment, where we go through the installer of each of the different BSDs. Now, I know you guys have been waiting for it. We've been waiting to do it, and it's finally happening. Yay! So, of course, we have your feedback and the latest news as well. And we even have our own very first viewer contest. So, some cool news today. So, there's a lot to get to today on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. Don't mess it. BSD Now, episode 19, the Installfest, recorded January 8th, 2014. Hi, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
And we're really glad to have you guys with us going into a great new year, 2014, and of course, plenty of news to talk about. So we're just going to get right to it today. First up, we have some free BSD news. What do they got going on today, Alan?
They've just posted the first cut of the continuous testing infrastructure. This is mostly work of Julio Marino. He recently came over from NetBSD, and he brought his Kiowa testing network framework.
Nice.
And they've got this set up now so that it will basically be testing FreeBSD in a loop. So it will find problems as quickly as it can.
So is that replacing like maybe the old Tinderbox runs or something?
I think partly, and I think it does a bunch of additional stuff.
So it's more than just checking if the code compiles and then nagging the person who broke it.
Yeah, I think it's actually doing more testing to make sure things actually work the way they're intended to, rather than just that it compiles.
That's cool.
And
I like that.
Yeah. They have 3 machines available for the testing purposes, and the very first one is up and running.
Okay. Looks like that's current and stable 10.
Right.
Got the first infrastructure in place. They're designing. This is also designed to help developers test and improve major scalability across huge amounts of CPUs and RAM.
Yep.
So I wonder if that server that we mentioned a while back is involved.
The big one from IX.
Yeah.
They mentioned 3 different machines, so they didn't buy 3 of those, but still,
well, maybe that's one of them.
You can have interesting issues when you have that much hardware. So having one that does and one that doesn't might be quite useful.
So for those who didn't hear, we're talking about that 80-core, 1 terabyte of RAM monster that IX built a while back.
Yeah, it's
the
crazy.
Foundation took possession of, so maybe that's one of those systems. It'd be cool if somebody would shoot us a tweet or an email and confirm if that's what they're using that for.
I think that was being used for a lot of different things. So
it probably has the horsepower to spare.
Yep. If over at Julio's blog, they have some details on what it actually does. Shows all the tests that are actually being run. So if I just take a look here, see what it says. Apparently that one hasn't run yet. Currently there are 16 tests failing on 10 stable.
Fix that.
Most having to do with C++ by the look of it. Showing all the different tests that passed, many of them, but there were 4 that were broken and 12 that failed.
Well, that's cool. At least they'll be able to keep up to date on that stuff now. Because I know the Tinderbox stuff's kind of misleading. People commit stuff, it compiled, but...
Yeah, it made this thing not do what it's supposed to do anymore or something like that.
You need a little bit more real-world testing there on hardware.
Yep.
That's cool.
So this provides a lot of interesting stuff. I've seen a presentation at this at a conference, and it looks quite detailed and interesting.
Well, hopefully they'll have some more info on that at one of the upcoming BSD conferences. I'd like to see a little bit more details on the framework and how their cluster's set up and whatnot.
And
Dev Summit.
He also says if you're looking to help out with this, there's a bunch of existing tests that giving false positives. If it says it's broken and you go through the details and it appears that it shouldn't be broken, then that can be fixed.
Sure.
Also, updating the old style tests into the new build system, or porting additional tests from NetBSD over to FreeBSD.
So I imagine that's just a lot of scripting work.
Yeah, a lot of it is, most of the stuff's there. It just needs to be plugged into head and make sure it still works and stuff.
Oh, cool. Well, that might be a neat thing for someone to get involved with if you know a little bit of scripting. And
and it's testing
make sure that your relevant portions stay working.
Yep. And, testing's not quite as intensive. It's easier for people to get started with.
Oh, very neat. Okay, well, next item up, we have OpenBSD gets Signify.
Yes.
Looks like long last OpenBSD is going to get support for signed releases. So for the world's most secure OS, it was very easy to maintain kernel patches, updates, installer ISOs, everything. So that is nice. So how's that work, Alan?
So basically, it will allow them to sign the releases so that you can be sure the file hasn't been tampered with when you pull it down off the internet.
Okay, so it looks like it was committed to their current tree, being kicked around.
I don't think it's going to make it for 5.5, but we'll have to see.
Okay, and I'm just looking at the blog entry here. Yeah, some neat information. Could take a look at that. So it's, how do they pronounce that? Is it Signify or Signify?
I'm not sure which one it's supposed to be.
Okay, well,
that's one of those ones that'll probably be, crazy.
Yeah, of course.
Everybody will have their own way to pronounce that.
Yeah. So we got a pull quote from the article here that they say, briefly, the plan is to sign sets and packages. That's still a work in progress. So
right. I think by the sounds of it, packages will come first and then sets. Probably mostly because packages get updated more often.
Yeah.
And most people get their sets off the CD rather than the internet, whereas the packages often come off the internet.
Well, that's nice. That's neat to see him putting that in. So hopefully we'll see that in a upcoming release of OpenBSD.
Yep.
And what's the next item we got, Alan?
Yet another Faces of FreeBSD. This time it's
this time.
Isabel Long. She's a docs committer. A few other things. She writes Ruby on Rails and things like that. I think she did some of the work on the front page of the website to get the search box fixed, although I think it broke. I don't remember what happened. I remember talking about it at EuroBSDCon with her.
Okay.
Looks
like she participated in a Google coding contest as well.
Yeah, and that's how she got involved in FreeBSD in the first place.
Okay, 2011. So that's not too long ago. So she's been doing this a couple years now.
Before she contributed documentation and support for Ubuntu, but after getting introduced to FreeBSD, it made a lot more. The documentation was a lot easier to work with and so on. So she's been working quite hard at FreeBSD.
Oh, very cool. I'll pull a quote here from the article. The new committer mentoring process proved very useful, and that plus the accepting community of FreeBSD are the reasons why I stay involved.
Yep.
Very cool. Isabel Long, we hope you stay involved for a long time.
Yep.
Glad to have you in the community.
And it was nice to meet you at Malta.
I don't know her. Did I meet her? Maybe.
I think you were in the... She was at the Dev Summit, but I think you were in the other room. You didn't come to Docs, did you? No, you were doing...
No.
I think you were giving a talk in the other room at the same time.
That's entirely possible.
Yeah, it was crazy.
That's all like 6 months ago. I can't be expected.
There's that, and I was trying to be in 2 rooms at once. It was a little crazy.
Yep. Well, cool. We'll look forward to seeing who they get next week. But next up, we got Package Source 2013 Q4 branched.
Yeah.
So I guess the quarterly Package Source branch from NetBSD is out. And it's not approximately, I guess exactly 13,472 packages.
If you're running NetBSD current.
And 64.
Right. Almost as many, 13,049 are compiled with Clang instead of GCC.
Oh. Well, that's cool.
They also have Joyent SmartOS at about 11,000 for i286 and AMD 64. They have Darwin packages for OS 10 at 10,000 and packages compiled with GCC for FreeBSD 9.1 at 9324.
Is 9.1 the most recent FreeBSD?
No.
Release?
That's the latest one they seem to mention. I wonder if they didn't bother with package NG stuff. Like with 9.1 and older, package set makes a lot of sense or package source makes a lot of sense because there's the binary packages that come with 9.1 would be from like a year and a half ago now.
Sure.
Whereas package source will be from a week and a half ago.
Yeah. So you get a more recent set you can pull from now. if you're still running legacy stuff. So we had done an interview earlier with, and hopefully I don't butcher his name too bad. It was a Monty Schleier.
Yeah,
right,
something
Alan,
like that.
Something like that. So there was an interview a few weeks back. We'll have the link here in the show notes, talking about package source and how that works. So please refer back to that if you want to get some of those questions answered. And next up, we have OpenBSD on Google's compute engine.
Yes. So this is cloud fancy schmanciness. So compute engine is basically Google's cloud solution, similar to EC2 or OpenStack or things like that. And somebody put in a bunch of work to get OpenBSD working on it. Some of the interesting things are that instead of using the VirtIO block device, it actually uses VirtIO SCSI. So it emulates a SCSI device instead of a block device. It's a little more complicated because of that, but that's mostly still a work in progress, but does seem to be working. It says one of the complications is that the compute engine advertises extremely large queues, like 32,000 CCB queues and so on. And that was causing problems, and they had to kind of work around that.
Okay.
And they said that the network environment in compute engine is goofy. The DHCP server assigns an IP address with a /32 subnet mask, and then specifies a default gateway that is very far away.
Sure.
On Linux, the DHCP client has a special clause for a /32 network, and it basically adds a direct route to the default gateway when it's outside the subnet. However, that doesn't really work on everybody else's DHCP client, and so they had to work around that as well.
Cool. So it looks like right now they're only offering a couple OS choices, though. What is that? Debian and CentOS?
And there's beta FreeBSD we talked about a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. Well, good. It's at least in the works. And there's a custom OS option, so maybe that's where you can throw FreeBSD in there. Okay. Well, very cool. That's the end of the weekly news roundup. So next up, I guess, well, first of all, we got to mention our sponsor this week, of course. Brought to you, as usual, by the good folks over at IX Systems, rolling some awesome servers out, I'm sure, every hour of every day. I mean, those guys don't stop working. Christmas, your server gets, well, maybe not Christmas Day, but either way, it seems like it. But anyway, of course, as usual, we have a link. I'm not sure if it's in the show notes here, Alan, but ixsystems.com/BSD Now, where you can pull down some cool information. What'll that get you if you go to that link there, Alan?
You can get a free white paper on the questions you should ask before you buy a server, and just the different things you need to consider. And then you can also, fill out the details of what you're looking for and get a quote back, and they'll help you design the system that will be the solution to your problem.
Yeah, that'll fit your needs specifically. It just won't be the one on the back shelf that they want to get rid of. This is going to be
everything's
for you exactly.
built to order specifically for you. And so that brings us up. Michael Lucas, who's been a guest on the show before, recently had a similar problem. He's like, I write books about BSD, but I always have to scrape together a system to be able to do it on, to test stuff and see if it works. And I want to write this new book and talk about complicated configurations and maybe even play with ZFS. So I want to have like 8 hard drives in it. And he was asking around where to buy, and I was like, well, you got to go to IX Systems. And so he did, and he talks a bit about, he has a blog post here that we'll link to that, he kind of got a rough idea of what he was looking for, sent it off, and they helped him build up a system that works how he would like.
Well, and that's one thing he mentions in the blog article. It's not just that they do servers, they build desktop systems as well. They have like their Apollo line. As a matter of fact, that's what I'm running here at the moment, and they can custom build those. I guess I'm looking at what they built in here, something with 8 cores and Intel E5-1620 Xeon. All in the desktop. So they can build you some pretty cool
beefy
systems.
CPU too.
Yeah, that is.
32 gigs of RAM. 32 gigs of RAM.
32 gigs of RAM. Okay.
Which is the most you can. That's the most you can fit in a desktop style motherboard, like a workstation motherboard.
Let's see what kind of disks did they put in there. Where are they listed?
A 1260 V2, which is 3.7 gigahertz before the turbo boost.
Nice.
Yeah.
It looks like a set of some 1 terabyte SCSI drives. Looks like 4 of them.
No, there's 8.
Yeah.
4 connected on the onboard SATA and 4 connected via a controller card.
Okay, there you
Does
go.
it say which? Probably like an LSI card, that 4-port one.
And he's running, looks like Geom RAID on there.
Yep. And it's
So
got
that is
the
pretty cool,
motherboard
running
assisted
current, of
RAID
course.
so that if the boot drive dies, his system will still boot off the next drive.
Very nice system, though.
Yes.
So, yeah, our sponsor can definitely build those for you as well. So, if you just need to get a nice powerhouse workstation, they got
Exactly.
some great boxes they can custom build you there.
Yep. And well, because one of Michael's biggest concerns was, if he buys a tower type server, it's just going to be too noisy to have at his desk, and so he
Sure.
wanted to actually get something like a workstation style.
No, the one I have is an older i7 920, but it's silent. Like
Yep.
you don't hear it. It's a well-built workstation. Put it on my desk or under, and it wouldn't bother me.
Exactly.
Quite a nice system.
Yep.
Only 16 gigs of RAM though, so my
Well, yours is from a little while ago, though, right?
Yeah, it's an older box.
Well, yeah, 920. That'd be 4 generations ago,
yeah. I've had it for a couple years
Yeah.
now. So.
and it still works. That's the important thing.
It does still work. It is chugging away. I've replaced the video card in it just to put a newer NVIDIA.
Yep.
But that's it.
Yep.
Everything else works great.
It's all I've changed in my i7 as well.
Well, cool. So again, check out that link, ixsystems.com/BSD
BSD
Now. Download their free guide, and there'll be some contact locations on there where you can get in touch with somebody to see if they can build you the system of your dreams. Next up, we'll be coming back in just a moment with our tutorial for the day, the Installfest.
Yes.
Looking forward to that.
This is a big one.
Be back. Yeah, it is. This is going to be cool. So be back in just a moment. Okay, next up, we got a really cool tutorial for you guys this week. We're going to be doing the Installfest, which I know a lot of people have requested, and we've had it on our radar for a while, but we're finally getting around to it. Today's the day. Good way to start the new year.
It is.
So first up, we're going to be starting with FreeBSD 10, and we've got a whole slew of them, so I'll just give you the order we're going to be going in. We'll do FreeBSD 10.0. Next, we'll be doing OpenBSD 5.4. After that, NetBSD 6.1.2, and then Dragonfly BSD 3.6. And last but not least, PCBSD 10.0. I believe this is RC3.
Okay. So for FreeBSD, when you first boot the installer CD, I think I use the CD or the DVD, one of them. Anyway, you have the option to do the install, drop to just a shell for something quick, or to start the full live CD environment, which lets you log in as root and
Mess around.
do whatever you need to do. So obviously we're doing an install, so we'll choose install. Now, new in the 10 installer, thanks to Devin Teskey and some complaining by Warren Block, instead of asking you, do you have a strange keyboard, yes or no, and defaulting to yes, Warren and I decided, well, it would make more sense if it defaulted to no, since most people probably don't have a strange keyboard.
Sure.
But also, when you did say yes and got a list of keyboards and selected one, if that wasn't the right one, you had to start all over again. And it was very annoying.
Oh, you had to reboot? Ouch.
Well, Control-C and restart the installer.
Okay.
Instead, now you get the list, and when you select one, there's then an option at the top of this list here called Test the Current Key Map. When you pop that up, you can type stuff and see if the letter you pressed actually prints the correct letter. Once you're sure that's working, then you say continue with this key map, or pick a different one if it wasn't working. So yeah, that's
you got to do that. Otherwise, the only time you type something in is your password.
Yes.
And usually it doesn't show it. You have no idea.
that was exactly. I had that problem. I was using a KVM on a remote system, and the KVM was configured to be British. And so when I typed some of the special characters in my password, they weren't the right ones. So then when I went to log in over SSH, it didn't work.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, but I need to log in with the password once to set up my keys.
That's right.
Yeah. So then our host name, we'll just call it BSD Now. Then you can choose your sets. We don't really need games, and we'll turn off ports because if you get it with port snap, it's fresher, and this just saves time that way. Now, the image I used doesn't have it turns out I used the boot only disk. So rather than having the files on the CD that I downloaded a small ISO, and it's just going to fetch the files over FTP. If you're only doing one system, this is probably a bit faster than downloading the full DVD because you don't download anything you don't need.
Sure.
So we'll let it configure the network. Select a mirror. Now here's one of the other changes in the 10 installer is in addition to the original guided mode, which just asks you, which disk do you want to do? Do you want to use the whole disk or edit the partition table? And walks you through it pretty simply. Manual just lets you do it all manually. Or shell mode would drop you into a shell and be like, partition it and set it up however you want, and then type exit and we'll install on whatever you have set up in /mnt.
Basically do all the tar extracts for you.
Yeah. So this allowed you to do things like set up root on ZFS or set up Geli-based disk encryption and things like that. So if you look at our full disk encryption tutorial, you can see how we did that in the shell a couple weeks ago. And new now is the automatic root on ZFS option that Devin Teskey and I wrote with the help of some other people. So we'll choose that one this time. And you'll see that it probes what available disks there are and then shows a couple of different options here. So we can choose our pool type and the disks. Apparently I don't have any disks.
Who needs disks?
That's strange. I'll have to look at that. That might be my fault. But you can set the name of your pool, whether you want to use 4K sectors or not. Generally, you do, even if your disk isn't. It just saves complications in the future because ZFS doesn't like mixing 512-byte sector drives with 4K sector drives. So once a pool's created, it's stuck at that size. So even if your disks are just 512, you make your ZFS pool be 4K so that you can replace the disks in the future without headache. And the special option here is you can choose to use Geli to encrypt your disks automatically in the installer. And it'll prompt you for the password and things like that. You can choose between GPT and MBR. Recommend GPT unless you have a system that won't boot. And it would have to be pretty old not to do GPT. And you can set how much swap you want on each. Yeah.
But you don't have a disk, so you can't.
Yeah, we'll come back to that.
Well, see, the problem is FreeBSD supports physical disks, virtual disks, but they don't support theoretical disks yet.
Yeah.
So eventually we'll get theoretical.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems I did remove the disk and not add any disks. Whoops. So we'll come back to that one. So OpenBSD. With this one, you boot the CD that it comes with, and you have the options to either install a fresh system, upgrade your existing system, or drop to a shell and do whatever you want to do. So in our case, we'll do an install. You can choose your keyboard layout. You can type one in or press L for a list, or just press enter to use the default. Set our host name. Pick which network card to use. If you want to use set your IP address or use DHCP. You can configure multiple interfaces there in a loop there. Set your password. Decide whether or not you want to start SSHD by default. And if you want to start NTPD by default. If you want to have an X Windows system. If you want to set up a user. Oh, right. Select the disk to install to. We'll use the whole disk and an auto layout.
One of the notes here is you can pretty much complete it just by hitting enter, 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 and then eventually typing a root password.
Basically, yes. And also they're working on automated installation support. So that if you pixie boot, it'll look for install.conf, find the answers to all those questions, and that way you don't have to press enter. So you just watch and it goes by and does it all for you. So I deselected the X sets because we're not going to be using those, and the install is progressing.
Oh, there you go.
And after a couple of seconds, it'll be done. We can reboot, and we'll have a working OpenBSD system.
Very nice.
Indeed. Almost done. Suppose we can do NetBSD while we wait.
Sure. At least set the options.
I appear to have accidentally changed it into German or something.
Oh.
There, installation in English. There we go. Install NetBSD to a hard drive. I found only one disk, so it's not going to ask us which disk we would like to use.
Nice.
Nice optimization. We can do a full installation, or we can do an installation without X, and then set our drive. So use the entire disk. Install some boot code. Set up our partitions.
It has the "do you really want to do this" text. That's nice.
Yep.
Speaking of that, like, I remember years ago we had somebody file a bug report with our stuff. They're like, I know you have a confirm screen, and then it asked me again whether you're really ready to install, but like it wasn't obvious enough, and I accidentally erased my system. And I'm like, what do you want it to blank? I mean, come on.
Yep. Shall we
Pulling
continue?
this from the net.
No, this one has it on the CDs. So
Oh, okay, cool. Fast.
Yep. Install from the CD. Continue. Maybe I don't have it on the CD. What's going on here? Command failed. Ah, yes. Appears I don't have it on the CD.
Boot only.
FTP it is.
Yep. Does it pick a mirror automatically for you, or?
I think I'll get that in a second. It defaults to ftp.netbsd.org and allows you to change it.
Okay, cool.
There we go. See the FTP message of the day go by, and now it's downloading. So if we look back at the OpenBSD machine, we can see that it's now done. Update the time. Makes the device nodes, and we're done. So if we just type reboot, we'll have a working OpenBSD system. And NetBSD is continuing its installation. So, Dragonfly BSD.
Okay.
So in this one, you get dropped to a regular login prompt immediately, and you can either choose to log in as installer, and this will start the installer, or log in as root, and it's a live CD.
Oh, interesting.
So we log in as installer, and it doesn't even ask for a password, it just starts the installer. And we can choose to install Dragonfly BSD. Are you sure? You're strongly encouraged to back up any important information on this computer before we destroy it.
That's right.
Select our disk. Use the entire disk. We are absolutely sure that this is our last chance to cancel. Formats the disk.
Is this sysinstall based, or is this a rewrite?
This looks kind of different and kind of the same. I'm not entirely sure. You can choose to use Hammer or UFS. Set up your partitions. Begin installing the files. So we see our... Oh. Got to remove the CD from the OpenBSD, so it started the installer again. My bad. And you see our NetBSD here is still running. It's downloading...
What speed do you get?
Oh, I'm getting megabytes per second.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I have fast internet. There, it's done.
Megabytes. How big is it? Shouldn't take that long.
In the network information, you entered accurate in the machine and regular. Do you want to install in etc? Yes. And now we can do any other configuration we want. You set a root password. And then finish. And we're done. So now we can reboot the computer.
Cool.
So back to OpenBSD, and we now see we have an OpenBSD machine. Running 9.4. And that's about all there is to it, to get an OpenBSD machine up and running. And if you leave the X11 stuff turned on, you'll even start with X11.
Do they have, what's their default window manager?
I have no idea.
Is it that crazy one Michael Lucas likes?
Probably CWM. And we see our NetBSD machine is coming up as well.
Okay.
And we can see there's NetBSD 6.1.2.
Sweet.
Dragonfly is still installing. Here we go. Do we want to install bootblock? Yes.
Why not?
We would like it to boot. That would be good.
Somebody posted that OpenBSD defaults to FVWM. CWN and TWN are still in the base, but you just have to choose them. Thank you for the info.
Set a root password. Don't think there's anything else we need to do. And now we can reboot this computer.
Cool.
Just...
Be able to show the GUI for the next one?
For PCBSD? Yes.
PCBSD? Yeah. Okay. One thing I will mention, ours is a little different when you do a desktop install in that it's not going to ask you for root or users or
anything like that.
Any of those things until you reboot. First time you boot up, it'll do that.
So Dragonfly is booting up now.
Okay, cool.
And I got our FreeBSD machine rebooting with a hard drive this time.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It's like, well, let's get rid of the old hard drive and make a new one so that it'll be empty, and then forget to actually add the new one, and that didn't work out so well.
Why'd you remove the old one? Did you just want to start from scratch? Or?
Right. It had stuff from the disk encryption tutorial on it.
Oh. Does the installer blow that stuff away properly, or is that
Probably, but
Probably.
when we were going through the menus, I wanted it to look like it was a fresh hard drive,
Oh, I got you.
so as not to confuse people when they're trying to do the same thing in their own virtual box.
Makes sense.
Yeah, Dragonfly's starting up.
Okay, cool.
So it's FreeBSD. They look remarkably similar.
It's all just scrolling text messages. I don't know.
So now we have our Dragonfly 3.6-release machine.
Cool.
And FreeBSD. So again, install. Unselect ports. Configure networking.
Mm-hmm.
Pick a site. ZFS. Here we go. So we have our pool name, whether we want encryption, things like that, and we can select which type of ZFS pool we want. I only added one disk, so we'll just do a stripe. If you have multiple disks, you can choose the other options.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can just put check mark in each disk you want to use. So if you have 10 disks and you only want to use 6, then you can do that.
Sure.
All your other stuff, and then when you choose install, it says, this is your last chance. Are you sure you want to completely blow away this drive and set it up as ZFS? And we'll say yes.
Mm-hmm.
It'll load ZFS, and it asks us for the passphrase for our disk encryption.
Nice.
So we enter the passphrase for disk encryption twice, and it will start initializing the encryption. Now it's going to connect out to the FTP site and download the files for FreeBSD.
Mm-hmm.
And while that does that, we'll take a look at pc-BSD.
Yay.
So this one's graphical. I haven't got the screen capture quite set up right to capture the entire GUI because it's a much bigger window, but you can see what's happening here. Make sure we have it on English and choose next. Then we have the option of we can install a desktop, which is pc-BSD, a server, TrueOS, or restore an existing system from Life Preserver, which you said that was what you did today, right?
Yeah, I did that today. That's our bare metal restore. So if you've done a backup to like a FreeNAS box or something with ZFS send and receive, you can choose that from the install disk and just pull it right back down over the wire.
And then you can choose to customize some of the packages, but by default, you'll get a nice KDE with VirtualBox and all the fun stuff.
Yep. And there's a pretty good sized list in there of various desktop environments. We're agnostic, so whatever you want to run.
So then you can select which disks you're going to use. In this case, we're going to use my 20 gigabyte disk with ZFS and create the default dataset. So you can customize that if you want, but generally not necessary. Start the installation now, and it will start doing the installation.
There it goes. So somebody just asked, what is TrueOS? That's basically our server version of pc-BSD. It is FreeBSD with just some additional bits, which make it, or we don't want to call it FreeBSD, obviously, for copyright reasons. But it's FreeBSD with our PEFs kernel module. It has some different packages installed by default out of box, like Bash and some other things that Linux users are used to.
And it uses your package repos, which have different compile options. Mostly it's pc-BSD without the GUI.
That's correct. It's basically everything of ours without the GUI, including all the command line versions of Ord, Life Preserver, etc.
Yep. It's quite useful. So now we can see it's using the ZFS commands to create our various pools and stuff. I see that Chris decided that the default install should call the pool tank. Yeah.
Well, if you hit customize and do the advanced option, you can change the name.
Right.
So you just pick if you want to call it pool or my disk or whatever your default is.
Anything but tank.
Anything but tank. I'm sorry, I like tank. This is cool.
I've decided that all pools should now be called submarine.
Submarine.
something equally as ridiculous.
And I had mentioned earlier too, but as you saw in the install, Alan did not say anything about like users or root or any of that. The first time you boot up, there's a welcome wizard which is going to run, which will allow you to set your root user. It'll connect you to Wi-Fi if you're on a laptop, set up your users, etc. And we did that for a couple reasons. One, because I set up a lot of systems for people, and it's nice if I can just give them a box, and then the first time they boot it, they can put their own passwords in. Like, I don't need to.
Yeah, it gives you that kind of the OEM out-of-box experience, right? You open it up and you customize it for you.
We had a vendor in the UK ask for that at one point. They were shipping a system out, and they're like, it'd be nice to have an OEM type install where they could just give it to the user, and it's like they're booting for the first time. And then, of course, that's when it's going to ask you if you want to encrypt home directory and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. So while that's installing, because it takes a bit longer, because there's a lot more stuff when you install KDE and so on.
A couple gigs of packages easily.
So back to FreeBSD, it's now finished extracting all the stuff from the FTP site, and it's asking us for our root password. And now it asks about time zone. We'll set that to UTC, the only true time zone. You can choose to enable various things. SSHD is on by default, but NTPD is not, so maybe you want NTPD. If you want to say power, enabling PowerD will scale the CPU back when it's not busy, especially useful on laptops, things like that. Then it asks, would you like to add any additional users to the system? Especially if the system's remote and you want to be able to SSH in, you want this because by default, root can't SSH in on FreeBSD.
Sure.
So we can create a new user called BSD Now. Importantly, if you want to be able to SU to root, you have to be in the wheel group. So we'll invite ourselves there.
It doesn't add you by default for the first user?
No, it doesn't.
Oh, okay.
You can choose whether to lock the account or not, and then say yes, and now you're done. And you get dropped back to the main menu where you can add more users, change the root password again, configure host name, networking, services, time zone, or even read the handbook. Or you can choose exit. Once you exit, you have the option to drop into shell in your new system. So rather than being the regular shell you would get from the installer, this is actually starting a shell in the installed system. Allow you to make any changes you want to make before it boots. If you want to, load kernel modules or edit your loader.conf or anything like that. We don't need to do that here, and then you can choose reboot.
Cool.
And then that'll boot up, and we'll have our working FreeBSD system.
So since you did a full install with KDE, it may take a while in a virtual box.
Yes. It is definitely not going quickly, is it?
No. I mean, you could be there a good 20 minutes easy.
Okay.
So we may
have to use a little fast forward magic.
Yes. Creative editing.
Yep.
Well, if you want, you could cut it here. And we'll
just let the FreeBSD finish booting, and then we'll cut it.
Cool.
Takes a little while to boot in VirtualBox. It's like BIOS emulation inside virtualization and so on. It's yeah.
It is what it is.
That's probably one of the reasons you picked Grub over the traditional loader, so it doesn't BIOS emulate reading the giant kernel files.
Much quicker.
Yes. I noticed Dragonfly has that same delay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Same-ish loader stuff, right?
Now, OpenBSD has a little bit more complex loader.
Yeah.
So they don't do that, do they?
Their loader is smaller and more complex at the same time. I'm not sure how they do that.
It's like encryption and other stuff.
Yeah, you can decrypt before you start. Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. Watching text scroll by.
Mm-hmm.
I do it for a living, so
Just another day at the office for Alan.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to have done the FreeBSD install at least 1,000 times now. And then, almost the second 1,000 times while working on the ZFS boot code. I went through that installer so many times I could do it with my eyes closed.
Oh, yeah.
So then it was really strange to start doing 9.2 installs because we added all those new menus. And so it's not the same when you go back to a 9.2 from a 10. And it's like, oh, right. That's different.
Yeah. How do you do that again?
That menu looks different. Which option do I want again? Almost done. You can do it. Come on.
You can get there. Well, you have the other VM doing all the install bits too.
Yeah. There's plenty of bandwidth available though.
The little VM that could.
Yep. Oh, right. Sorry. It's actually paused for a reason. It's asking for the password for the encrypted disk.
Was it hidden in the messages?
Yes. They really got to make that prompt print out in a different color.
Longest FreeBSD boot up ever.
Well, it'll give up after a little while.
Yep.
They really got to make that prompt a different color so it stands out from all the other messages.
I hope that's something that gets fixed in new cons. They can find some way to prioritize it. Say this appears on top of everything else.
Yeah. And there we go. We have our 10.0 RC4 system.
Cool.
Yep. So yeah, we'll be back in just a second to show you the rest of the pc-BSD install.
Okay. We are back to see where our pc-BSD install had left off.
Yeah.
So where's it at?
So it's finished now. So it installed all the KDE and all the other fun packages. You now have the option to save your configuration to a USB stick, which will allow you to automate this install across a whole bunch of machines after the fact.
Ooh, let me mention a little bit about that here.
Please.
So we use a different installer called pc-sysinstall, and every install you do with it is 100% scripted. So after you've done this installation via the graphical utility, you can save that config file or that script to a USB stick or copy it off to another system, and then you can deploy other systems with that same script. So it's really cool. Like if you're prototyping an install for a server or some system, you can even prototype in VirtualBox, save the script, and then you can, there's some Pixie tools and stuff to let you do automated deployments, which is pretty nice.
Yep. So if we hit finish here,
Okay.
we'll see that VirtualBox crashes.
Yay!
That's exactly what I expected to happen. So now we see we have a pc-BSD system, and obviously we want to do this in English.
Of course. I'm setting up some root passwords now.
Yep. So it'll ask time zone, etc. Where'd you hide UTC in there?
I'll bury it in the list somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a demo. There's no problem doing your local time zone.
Sure. Fine then. So when we set the root password, create an additional user.
So this user will be put in the wheel and operators group by default. That's kind of like your master user.
Yep. You have the option to encrypt the user's files.
That'll enable PEFs on your home directory.
Yeah. And then VirtualBox will crash again.
Oh no, VirtualBox crashed.
But that'll be it. Then you'll be at the desktop, right?
Yeah. Then you'll just be at the login prompt.
Yep. And that's about all you need to see.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Alan.
Yes.
Hope you guys enjoyed the Installfest this week, and I'm sure we'll dig into the nitty-gritty on some of these different versions of BSD down the road.
Yep.
But we'll be back in just a moment with your feedback and questions. Next up, our weekly news roundup. We're going to be going through some of the quick notables from this past week. So first up, we have an article here about building an open BSD wireless access point. Yep. So who wrote this, Alan?
No idea.
No idea.
Does it say at the bottom somewhere?
Let me look at the blog here. About me,
Okay.
Tom Van Looy.
Okay.
He lives in Flanders, Belgium. Okay.
There we go. Question answer. So he says that he has a Linksys wireless access point that he uses to provide Wi-Fi to his house, but he's never been satisfied with it, and he's had a bunch of trouble. So he would rather use OpenBSD. So he talks about how to do that. He's got he says he's got a Socrus Net 5501 and also an older, less powerful Net 4801. And he found a wireless USB adapter and a wireless mini PCI adapter that he could consider using. So he sets up the Net 5501 with Pixie Boot and installs the base. Because the Socruses don't actually have a video card of any kind, so you have to do everything over the serial console.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So
that sounds like a fun project.
Yep.
Going through the serial console, then he sets up network and wireless.
Yep. So he installs the system, sets up IP forwarding, makes it a router, and sets up his wireless.
Then, of course, at the end, he puts the obligatory puffy sticker on it to make
device,
it official.
And there you go. You have a wireless router.
Very cool. Well, that would be a neat article if anyone's interested in setting it up and replacing their off-the-shelf unit, which we would highly encourage you to do.
Yes, they're always much better.
Okay, next up, we have something from our buddy Michael Lucas, who we had on a few weeks back.
Yep.
I guess he's been doing some work playing around with FreeBSD 4.x jails.
Yes, he's got an in-house application where he works that was written for FreeBSD 4 and using incredibly old versions of PHP, Perl, and OpenSSL. And so in order to get all that to work, he had to jump through some hoops. He looked at virtualizing it, but device drivers have changed and all kinds of things. So it made more sense for him to just run it in a jail, and also that way you get better performance than if you virtualize it.
And I love the quote. This is so Michael. It's an acceptable trade-off if it means I don't have to touch actual PHP code. Very nice, Michael.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Hey, we got some other OpenBSD news. Story Unscrewed, a story about OpenBSD.
Yeah.
Interesting title there. So it looks like, let's see who wrote this. Skeptech.org. Loading.
It says, he says, to put it in no uncertain terms, I was screwed. It's 5 a.m. and the network is down. The network is down because the core router had crashed. Both of them, in fact, the master and the backup. And to make matters worse, it was only 12 hours or so after the network was down because the switches had crashed. Yes,
nice.
All of them at once.
Murphy's Law,
Yeah. Have you ever heard of something like that? 3 switches, core dumped. So he goes on to tell a story of how he saved himself by replacing the big Cisco gear with some OpenBSD.
Nice. Hence the Unscrewed.
Yes.
Very cool. So this is a pretty cool war story about replacing very expensive routers and network equipment with cheaper hardware and BSD. So he mentions a lot of the built-in tools and how OpenBSD is great for routers and high security applications. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the Socrus one we just had a moment ago. So that's kind of cool. And go check out those.
Their machine was one new Supermicro box, like you can buy from IX Systems. That's what I have at my house, except for I run FreeBSD instead of OpenBSD. Mostly because I also want to run Beehive on it.
Yes.
It's like,
which is cool.
Every time I get a machine with newer hardware, it's like, that could be useful for Beehive.
I think you'll see more and more of that. 2014 and 15 will be the years of Beehive.
Yep.
A lot of development still happening there.
Yep.
So. Very cool. Okay, well then next up, a little PC-BSD news. So we released our 10.0 RC3 this last weekend, or announced it Monday, I believe. One of the biggest things is it adds some new support for detecting ATI hybrid graphics, which I'm not sure if they have any other name for that. I've looked, I can't find anything. I guess it's just hybrid.
Right.
So that'll be like laptops with an Intel chip that uses ATI, similar to NVIDIA with Optimus. So we're doing some other work next up on NVIDIA Optimus detection as well. Let's see, one small thing we did was we tagged Linux jails as experimental, just to let people know this isn't the same as virtualization. You're running through a Linux compat layer. So naturally some of the commands aren't going to work, and don't complain, it's now tagged as experimental. But anyway, so that all happened this last week, and we are working on our RC4 at the moment.
Nice.
So hopefully we'll have something to announce about that over this next weekend or early next week.
Yeah, I see you also mentions here that you added new logic for disk detection.
Yes, there was some fixes in there for doing disk detection. I had some weird cases of some systems where the disk queries were taking longer than 30 seconds.
Ooh.
And they work. I don't know why it was taking that long, and it wasn't USB from what I understand. So just put some extra checks in there to say maybe this is just a really long time to come back, but it may actually return 45 seconds in, and it'll fix that now and detect those disks, which I would hope that eventually we'll find out what's taking so long on that. But in the meantime, you can now install.
Cool.
So cool. So that's our weekly news roundup. We'll be back in just a moment with feedback and questions from you in the audience. So first up in this week's feedback section, we have a question from Daniel, who's trying to migrate to BSD. So he says, first of all, great show, guys. Thanks, Daniel. We appreciate that. So he has a question about switching from an Ubuntu server 12.04 that has ext formatted disks on the file server. He's wondering what the easiest and best way to migrate over to FreeBSD, FreeNAS, and ZFS. Let's see, can FreeBSD read ext4 so I can copy data? It can in limited read-only mode.
Right.
So depending on how your setup was, you may be able just to mount it read-only and pull that data back off of ext4. Let's see, other questions. Do FreeBSD install on a ZFS disk? So you could try, and he kind of mentions it here too, you could try ZFS on Linux, format the disk, and then import it under FreeBSD as well.
If you create it ZFS on Linux, then export it, you can import it on FreeBSD, and it should work fine. Although, if you have two machines, you can easily copy over the network or something as well.
Sure.
Although, depending on your network, it might be speed limited.
Yeah, it sounds like he's just trying to do it on one machine, box, though. So, and in this case, it might just be easier if you can mount the ext4, maybe test it, get a FreeBSD install CD, go to the shell, see if you can mount your file system.
Does the ext4 require like a fuse, like a thing from ports to do ext4?
ext2fs is what it uses.
Right, so that should still be able to read ext4, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
In read-only mode, and I think that's in the base.
Right. Okay.
So I don't think you need it, although there may be some fuse bits you can mess with too.
Right.
There's a sysutils ext4 fuse implementation.
I think that's even
as well.
Is that possibly even read write? But your easiest way to tell would probably be boot off the FreeBSD installer CD and see if you can mount the disk, and if you can, then you can.
Then you're good. You can do your install to another disk, just mount it and start copying
files over
ZFS. Yep. So that would probably be the easiest way. So hope we answered your question there, Daniel. Thanks for writing.
Yep.
Okay, and you got the next one.
So the next question is from Eric, and he asks about BSD goals. He says he's watched all the shows and a long-time fan of TechSnap, and he likes what we're doing, and he's very interested in BSD and ZFS. So he's planning to set up some test rigs to play with FreeBSD, and he asked if we could help him setting up some goals for training and what kind of things should he aim to do. He has zero experience on BSD, and so he's wondering what kind of thing to start with. He says he has 5 old servers and a lot of desktops that he can play with, so he can do quite a advanced setup. He's just wondering what type of things he should try to learn.
Well, I mean, I could think of a few things offhand.
Yeah.
I mean, just basic sysadministrating stuff. Can you add users? Can you remove users? How about configuring the firewall?
Yep.
Adding new disks, messing around with the zpool command.
Yep.
But if you want to get into more nitty gritty like sysadmin stuff, like say you're running a Windows network, well, how do you set up Samba?
Yep.
Doing cups for printing, etc. What can you think of?
Yeah, for the basic sysadmin stuff, if you go and look at the list of goals and requirements for the BSD certification, which is things like adding users, removing users, controlling permissions, updating the OS, updating packages, installing ports, and all the basic stuff you have to be able to do to manage the system in the long term. So playing with all of that would be useful. And they have a bunch of training material that comes with that you can download for free. And but mostly it kind of gives you this list of goals, and it's like you need to be able to do X, and then you can figure out how to do it.
Yeah, since you say you're doing FreeBSD as well, I mean, you could just start going through the handbook. That's a great, place to start off. They got a good handbook, lots of good information. That'll get you through a lot of the basics. How do I get installed?
Yeah, how do I
add a user?
How do I set up the GUI? How do I, mess with this and that and the other thing?
Yeah, installing applications on it once it's up and running. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can do this. And of course, Google or insert search engine here is your friend in this case, because usually that's what I do. I mean, I don't remember all this stuff. I'm like, oh, how do I tweak that PF rule again? You look it up. Usually there's a post on forums.freebsd.org or something like that.
If it's not in the handbook, it's probably on the forums.
Yeah, somebody's posted the exact same question. I'm almost positive, and you can find it with a little bit of a searching.
Unless you're doing something really strange, somebody's probably done it before.
Yep, that's right. So again, searching is your friend. But it sounds like you got enough systems you could definitely start learning right away. So we wish you the best with that.
Yeah, some other things you could do, setting up NFS between a couple of the servers and, playing with different things.
Sure.
But I think the handbook will be very handy there. It has lots of chapters on doing, there's like 25 chapters or something on doing everything you can think of. So you might want to just start at the top.
Okay. Well, good. Hope we answer your question there. So we'll be going to the next one, I guess, from SW. So I'm not sure what that stands for, but hi, SW. So he says, hello again, as always. Still really enjoying the show, so we're glad you're enjoying it. He has a question which he is sure has frustrated many FreeBSD users and admins. So he says the annoying thing he finds with FreeBSD is that the disk drive device name changes as the drives in the machine change. In other words, you have 80, 81, 82, and you remove 81 from the machine. When you reboot, 82 is now 81.
Yep.
From what he understands, you can wire down or force your drives to a specific port and device name in FreeBSD. So he's trying to find information on how to force it to stick to that device name.
You can't really do, like in FreeBSD 8 and before, the AD device name corresponded to the port on the SATA controller. So, it would leave the gaps if there was nothing plugged in. On 9 and higher, it's ADA, and then it just increments manually. Mostly because with most people's setups, the drives weren't starting until like port 8 and stuff. Anyway, rather than doing that, what you want to do is label your disks. He says labeling is not an option. You use encrypted drives with GOM, and you can't write your label to the same spot. It depends. If you're using GPT formatted disks, you can label the partition as part of the partition table rather than the regular G label that puts it at the end of the disk. There's also UFS labels, right? Yes.
Yes.
And those work differently, and they're part of the file system on top of your encrypted drive, so that would still be an option. So rather than using GOM label, you'd use UFS label, which I think you do with TuneFS? Pretty sure. That you do with TuneFS, and then you can point to them in your FS tab that way. The only thing that wouldn't work for, I guess, would be your swap partitions.
So I'm checking here. I'd say there was an add a static option in the kernel, which I'm not sure. I thought at one point there was a way you could set a kernel option where it wouldn't reorder it. So as long as they're plugged into the same ports on the motherboard or on the controller,
right?
Like it'll still say 83 or whatever, and that won't change if you unplug 81. But that might be worth looking into. Or that could be my memory failing me, but I seem to recall that a couple years back. There's an add a static ID.
Interesting.
This is both of us searching. Are you looking for it?
Yes. I'll just quickly look at the other thing I recommended to you.
Yeah, so it's called Add a Static ID, and that's on in 10, it looks like by default. Let me just...
Well, 10 has disk ID. Is that what you're talking about?
Give me just a second. I'm looking to see what it is.
So in FreeBSD 10, there's also disk ident, which is part of GOM and actually gives it like a unique serial number for each disk that you use instead of ADA0 or whatever. And those are tied to the physical disk, and so it'll find your disk wherever it moves around. But yes, if you look at tunefs, the capital L parameter allows you to set a label on the disk. Yeah, add or modify the optional file system volume label. And that happens not at the partition level, but at the file system level, so it won't interfere with your GELI or GDBE encrypted disks.
Sure. All right,
so that's
so
an
I did
option
find it here.
Okay.
In the kernel, if you want to go to all the trouble of recompiling, there is the add a static ID option, which it looks like controls the numbering for your devices based on what controller and port they're attached to. So if it's not defined, it's going to start at 0 and then work its way up based on how they're discovered.
Right.
I think that's, let's see here, defining this is the default. So unless you've removed it, it should be on at least a more recent, because I'm looking at my 10 here, and that's how it's compiled. So I'd be curious to see what his setup is, why that's getting reordered on his.
Well, judging by he mentioned 8081, he's probably still running 8.
That may be the problem.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think you can still add that back to 8, though.
Okay.
So if you go turn that option on, maybe that'll fix it for you.
Do you want to stick the name of that option in the
show notes here?
just under his name so that people can find it? But yeah, if you're on 10, there's disk ident is part of the GOM label now, and it's an extra label on the disks that will be per drive and not related to the partition table at all. And that way it will not interfere with your GOM as well. Or using tunefs to actually do a UFS label on like slash and slash USR and so on. And that won't interfere with your existing GOM as well. But yes, it's a little annoying that GOM stores the data at the same place as GPT, and trying to do the two at the same time causes issues.
Yep.
Kind of surprised I haven't seen somebody hasn't come up with a fix for that yet.
What is the deal?
Well, I guess there's not. Where else can you randomly write data and hope that somebody's not going to overwrite it, right?
That's true. That's true. Okay.
Yeah, so hopefully that
we answered your question there
Yeah.
and gave you some things to look at. There's definitely a few different ways to skin this cat.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll let you take the next one here on.
So the next guy says, I run FreeNAS on a PC, and it's a regular box with HDMI, DVI, audio out, USB, etc. And he has an LCD monitor that acts as his TV, and so it doesn't support UPnP or DLNA or anything like that. So he says, can I plug my LCD with HDMI directly into the FreeNAS box and watch movies? I would say no.
No.
And
I don't believe so.
then he asked if he can install pc-BSD in a jail on FreeNAS, and I would say no.
Yeah, because at that point you're trying to run X in a jail.
Yeah.
And while there's probably somebody out there who's hacked something up to make that work, I imagine that doesn't work out of box, and probably not on FreeNAS.
Probably the easiest solution to that is install pc-BSD instead of FreeNAS, and pc-BSD still has nice graphical utilities for managing your ZFS pool. And
Sure.
How hard is it to set up Samba on pc-BSD?
Well, it's installed by default, and you can just edit it and set up shares. It's pretty simple. You just, again, Google it and edit the entry in smb.com.
Right.
Set up your share. I mean, if you have access, if you could do multiple systems, just get a little headless FreeNAS box, put it under the desk, throw your drives in it, and then when you install pc-BSD, hook it up to the TV, you can just access the shares on FreeNAS, use that as your storage.
Yeah, but pretty much everything you do in FreeNAS you could do on a pc-BSD machine fairly easily.
Sure, just a different interface, but underneath you're still running a lot of the same ZFS commands.
Yep. So if you only have the one box, the easiest solution is probably to put pc-BSD on it. And like if you already have the files on a ZFS pool on the FreeNAS, you should be able to just export it and import it on on the, if it's encrypted, you'll have to copy the keys first.
Of course. Don't lose those.
Yeah, don't lose those.
So He has a second question too.
Yes. So he says, too many times I had to undelete accidentally deleted files or folders or search for accidentally moved files and folders. He says, in this FreeNAS box, I would like to set up one folder and any subfolders files as read-only to any device user connected to it. And he would want it to be like an archive. He wants to know how to set up that and also to save it from a potentially infected machine, writing data to it or something like that. So ZFS has a property called read-only you can set on a data set, and then nothing can ever write to that.
But I think he wants one user to be able to read only, right, and then another user writing to it.
That's just, standard permissions and
yeah.
You can do it with Samba.
Whatever sharing mechanism you're using, so Samba or whatever. And I would imagine FreeNAS has methods for doing that. And if not, hit up their forums. I'm sure somebody's already done this and can easily point you in the right direction.
Although, whenever you have a user that is allowed to write to it, you might have the problem of that user is the one that gets compromised by the malware. So depending how often you need to change it, maybe you can set it read-only and then turn the read-only off, make the changes you want, and turn the read-only back on. The other option is FreeBSD has the immutable flag, which says only root can modify these files, or the UCHG would be only the user that owns the file can modify the file, and that would stop anything else from being able to access change the file. But you can do most of that just with standard permissions. So yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully that was enough info to get him in the right direction.
Yep.
All right, next up, we have a question from Samuel, a question about dual booting. So, of course, he says, thanks for the great show. Again, thank you, Samuel. Appreciate it. He says he enjoys having a BSD-centered podcast to listen to and watch. So now on to his question. He's a longtime Linux user who's going to try switching to pc-BSD full-time when his new computer arrives. But his wife still needs access to Photoshop. So how do you recommend running Windows and pc-BSD together? He's planning on using pc-BSD 10. So he thought about using Beehive, but as he found out, it doesn't support Windows as a guest yet. Yep. So maybe down the road, maybe 11, that'll be something we're doing, but not quite yet. He's getting a K version of the CPU. VTD is not available. I think that'll make VirtualBox too slow to use.
No,
since it won't have direct access.
So VTD,
not in this case.
Right? VTD is only for hardware pass-through. It's not the same as VTX, which is what makes virtualization faster. So VirtualBox will still be plenty fast.
It'll run fine. So he was asking me what the best way is to dual boot. So you kind of mentioned it. You can do a real dual boot if you want. This is actually kind of cool that you mentioned this. I just set up a system about 4 months ago for my parents doing this exact same thing. They had some apps that they had to have Windows for. So we just set up a single pc-BSD box for them, put up dual monitors even, and then just set up Windows 7 in a VirtualBox. They can run VirtualBox full screen on one monitor, have pc-BSD on the other side, move the mouse back and forth, and for all intents and purposes, it's like having the two systems right there. And that works fine for them. Performance is great. They don't have VTD as well on their system, and performance is really good. We even set up pc-BSDs using encryption because my dad wanted that. And all his pc-BSD stuff's encrypted, and then we set up a shared folder within VirtualBox onto the pc-BSD side, so the share folder is all encrypted as well, and then in Windows he can access that if he needs to. But cool. It's definitely really cool. So that would be my recommended way to do it. But of course, if you really need to do the dual boot for some reason, like say you want to run a 3D game or something in Windows, then yeah, that's going to be your best solution there.
I've done something similar, except for when I set up VirtualBox, instead of using like a VDI file to hold the contents, I actually used a partition on the real disk. So the machine, when you boot it up, you had the dual boot menu to choose Windows or pc-BSD. And then when you chose one, say you started pc-BSD, then you could start Windows off the main hard drive in VirtualBox. And then do your Windows stuff. And then you could reboot, start Windows, and start pc-BSD in the VirtualBox, again, off the main hard drive.
That's just too cool.
Yes.
Oh, that's really
It's a little complicated to set up, but and the funny thing is it came around setting up on a machine that had Windows on it, and I wanted pc-BSD on it, but it didn't have a CD-ROM drive, and this was before USB was a big thing. And so using VirtualBox to write to the second partition on the existing disk in the machine was actually easier than going about it some other way.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
Crazy.
really cool, though. That's a neat solution. So where's the wiki article you wrote on
Yeah, I'd have to do it again in order to write a wiki article on it.
Figure out how to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Well, I hope that answered your question, Samuel. It sounds like you're going to have some fun with the new system. So best of luck to you. And that wraps up our weekly feedback and questions. So I thank you guys very much for writing in. We appreciate it. So next up, we have something special to announce this week.
Yes.
I'll let you announce it.
Okay, so we're having a little contest. As you might have noticed, we are in need of more tutorials to do. So we're offering a bounty. Open to all viewers. Write a tutorial for the show and send it to us, and we'll make it up into a tutorial on the show. And the winner of our little contest for the best tutorial will win a free handmade FreeBSD pillow.
Which, do we have a link to the picture of it here? It's in the contest, right?
Yeah. Let me pull that up quick.
Okay.
So you can see how amazing it is.
Yeah, it is quite cool.
So here's a picture on bsdnow.tv/contest. You can see it's a big pillow. I think it's, do they have the measurements here? Not off the top of my head, no. But it's a nice big pillow made by hand, and it's the FreeBSD boot screen with the little beastie guy. Mm-hmm. Made in Greece. So if you want to send in a tutorial, we have a couple of tutorials that we've had the idea of doing but haven't got around to actually doing yet, if you are stuck on what to do it about. But we very much welcome you to come up with your own ideas and send them in. You know, did you recently want to do something, not know figure out how to do it? It'd be great to write a tutorial for everybody else, right? So, you know, whether it's about using CARP and failover to make redundant firewalls, configuring a mail server, setting up Nagios monitoring, doing IPsec and VPNs, or doing Capsicum or HammerFS or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just send your tutorial to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and we'll judge and pick the best one, and they will win a pillow. And most of the other tutorials will probably make it into the show.
Do we just have one of these pillows? Or,
just one, yes.
Do we have any for the hosts?
Well, I bought one for me.
Oh, okay. We have the link on here. Let's see. Buy them. Okay,
Yep.
There you go. That's what.
They're all made by hand, so it takes a little while. So you might want to get your order in before everybody else has a chance to.
Sure. That is really cool, though. Nice pillow. I need that.
And you can also choose to have it done with OpenBSD or NetBSD or something instead. So
that is really slick.
Pretty much anything you can do in ASCII art, you can do on a pillow.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, we look forward to seeing tutorials from you guys.
For sure.
And, when does it end, Alan?
Do we actually have a date?
You don't see one on here. Well, I assume at some point.
Yes, we'll announce a cutoff sometime next episode once.
Okay. After we discuss it. Let's see. Wait, TJ's saying something about the end of this month.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Okay.
The end of
this
January.
month, so end of January. Cool. Well, get your stuff in here. You still got a few weeks, and hopefully we'll be able to announce somebody early next month who won.
Yeah. Speaking of early next month, just a reminder that New York BSD Con, which is a one-day event themed the BSDs in production, is February 8th. So if you want to go to that, it's nycbsdcon.org.
And you will be out there.
Yes, I will be there.
Right, Alan? Okay. So if you'd like to go meet Alan and get some New York pizza or something else, definitely check it out. Cool.
Okay.
And he's putting the notes in our show notes here for the link to that. So excellent. Well, we're glad you guys are with us today. As usual, all these tutorials, everything we did today on the show is going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. The OpenBSD router tutorial we did a while back has also gotten some improvements. So it includes some options for encrypting all your DNS lookups, some cool utilities you can use for bandwidth monitoring, performance improvements, and just other fun router stuff. So that's kind of cool if you're going to set
I saw TJ finally got the hardware and built his own OpenBSD router. And so as he added features to it, he documented them all in the tutorial.
Okay. Well, cool. So yeah, definitely go take a look back at that tutorial. And as usual, send your questions, comments, show ideas, topics, or stories you want mentioned on the show to feedback@BSD.TV. That's pretty much the only thing we consistently monitor.
Okay.
So if you want it to be seen, send it there. And as usual, if you're listening to this recorded later in the week, you can watch us live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time or 1900 UTC and see all the crazy stuff that happens in between the segments that you see on the recorded
If you
show.
think the tutorials go bad on the recorded version, you see what happens live.
Yeah, live demos are so much fun.
Yep. And just a random bit of news also, BSD Now got a little unintended publicity at the 30th Chaos Communication Congress in, I think it's in Germany. It's kind of a security conference. And the one guy was giving a talk about a tool he wrote completely in JavaScript for accessing content over BitTorrent, like video, and watching it before it's finished downloading. And so he went to a popular BitTorrent tracker for podcasts, and BSD Now just happened to be the most recent thing, so it was the top link. And
Nice.
so yeah, we made a guest appearance at the 30th Chaos Communication Congress. Sadly, we were muted, but we made it there somehow.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Well, if you guys find stuff like that, again, that's a cool little thing to send in feedback@bsdnow.tv so we can mention it on the air.
Yep.
Cool. Well, excellent. Well, thank you guys so much for being with us on this show in the beginning of 2014. We really enjoyed having you with us, and we'll be back same time next week.
Yep.